Your .NET and SQL Server app has served you well over the years, hasn't it? But if it's still on premises, it's a prisoner. That's right, a prisoner. I'm going to show you how your app is imprisoned and how you can free it on AWS. Your old .NET app is bound on premises where it can't scale up and down elastically. It's chained to license fees for Windows and SQL Server. It's shackled by the need to manage servers. And it's confined by a monolithic architecture. But don't you worry, we're going to break out of here. Here's our escape plan. First, we get you into the cloud with a lift and shift where little to no changes are needed. That's going to modernize your infrastructure. Then we port your app to .NET Core so you can run on Linux and move to an open source database. Now you have license freedom. You're going to save so much money. Next, we move to portable containers and microservices, managed for you by AWS Managed Services. Finally, we go full cloud native and serverless with an event-driven architecture. Now, you don't have to do all these things or do them at the same time, but each one will give you more freedom. Now that you know the plan, let's get going. You'll be happy to know we've got some tools to help with all of this. It's time to bust out of here. In a lift and shift migration, the idea is to get up into the cloud the easy way without having to change anything. Let's start with your database. Here's your SQL Server on-prem. How do you get it into the cloud? Well, you've got two choices. One, if you like virtual machines, you can run SQL Server on EC2. But how do you bust out of on-prem and get it there? With the Database Migration Service. DMS will do the heavy lifting for you. It's a fast and secure migration with minimal downtime and zero data loss. Your other choice is to use a managed service, Amazon RDS, for SQL Server. How do you migrate your database to RDS? With the same tool, DMS. What about licenses? Both paths have options for license included or bring your own license. What do you get from moving to the cloud? Higher reliability and performance and a lower TCO. So listen to me and take the deal. Now that your database is on Cloud 9, we need to also lift and shift your .NET Framework app, again with minimal changes. That means staying on Windows, for now. If you like VMs, you can move to Windows on EC2. The easy way to get onto EC2 is with Elastic Beanstalk instead of doing everything yourself. It's a managed service and you get automatic patching and there's no additional cost for it. It's a steal! Or, if you're ready for containers, you can run on Windows containers in a managed service, like the Elastic Kubernetes Service, EKS. To containerize and migrate your app, use our App to Container tool, or A2C. And what's your reward for doing this? In AWS, you're now free to scale up and down elastically. And you have pay-as-you-go pricing. Nice work! You've modernized your infrastructure. Let's check our Freedom Scorecard. You freed your app and database from being bound on premises. On AWS, they can freely scale up and down elastically with pay-as-you-go pricing. But there are other freedoms we can attain when you're ready to go further. Let's see what modernization can do for us. Now, we're going to see how to stop paying those Windows license fees by running on Linux. To get there, you need to port from .NET Framework to cross-platform .NET Core. You guessed it, we've got a tool to help. It's called Toolkit for .NET Refactoring. It will give you a compatibility assessment and help port your code. Once you're ported, you can run on Linux. If you were running on EC2 Windows instances, you port your code using the toolkit, then redeploy to Linux instances. If you were on Windows containers, you port with the toolkit and redeploy to Linux containers. Now you have license freedom for your app. And before we go any further, make sure you're on a managed service. If you're still deploying to EC2 yourself, use Elastic Beanstalk or make the jump to containers. What about your database? You can also eliminate your SQL Server license fees by moving to an open source database. You can choose from Amazon Aurora, PostgreSQL, or MySQL, all managed for you by RDS, the Relational Database Service. Once again, you can use the DMS tool to move from your SQL Server on EC2 or RDS. We've got some other tools too. Your reward is database license freedom. Let's check our Freedom Scorecard. You freed your app and database from being bound on premises. And now, you have license freedom for both your operating system and database. and you don't have to manage your servers anymore. But there are still other freedoms we can attain. Let's see what modernizing our architecture can do for us. You can refactor your monolith application into a modern architecture. For example, let's say you have a big monolith application like this order system. You can extract portions of the app into microservices, each of which performs a single function. Microservices are small, isolated, and independently scalable. It can be a bit of work to refactor, but guess what? That's right, we have a tool to assist you, Microservice Extractor for .NET. It will visualize your app, identify dependencies, suggest microservice candidates, and extract code into separate microservice projects. You can run your microservices and containers in a managed service like EKS. And what do you get for doing this? Reduced complexity and efficient scaling. It's time to divide and conquer. But we're not done yet. Refactoring your app code from monolith to microservices is only half the job. You're also refactoring your database, creating purpose-built databases for each microservice. A great database to use for your microservices is DynamoDB. You can use the DMS tool to create Dynamo tables from your relational database, which will save you work. Let's check our Freedom Scorecard. You freed your app and database from being bound on premises. You have license freedom. You don't have to manage servers anymore. And you modernized your architecture to use microservices. But you could modernize your architecture further. Now it's time to consider going cloud native. Cloud native is about modern applications that target cloud computing environments, where they can take advantage of serverless compute and event-driven architecture. Let's focus first on serverless. You can re-architect to serverless functions using AWS Lambda. Take advantage of our tools, including the serverless application model that speeds up development, Lambda Power Tools, and the Lambda Annotations Framework for .NET. Now there is another way to go serverless. You can stay on container services like EKS and go serverless with AWS Fargate, which will automatically manage infrastructure and scale on demand. By going serverless, you don't have to concern yourself with capacity planning. Compute resources just spring into action in response to events. An event-driven architecture is based on the idea of decoupled services connected by events, such as an online order is submitted. In this example, the payment service, warehouse service, and shipping service all need to know about that. Or a customer might return an item at a physical store. The payment service and warehouse service will care about that event, but not the shipping service. You need sophisticated messaging to build an event-driven architecture. Amazon Event Bridge is an event bus that helps you send, receive, and transform events. It connects everything. You'll likely also be using Amazon's Simple Queue service and Simple Notification service. What's the benefit? If a service fails, everything else keeps running. You'll also reduce costs through push-based, on-demand use of resources. Get the message? It's time to get pushy. Let's check our Freedom Scorecard. You did it. You freed your app and database from being bound on premises. You have license freedom. You don't have to manage your servers anymore. And you modernized your architecture. You've removed all the friction, and now you can accelerate and innovate like never before. You, my friend, are indeed free. Now it's time to test your knowledge. Play the .NET Jailbreak game right now on your desktop or phone. It will simulate migration and modernization of a .NET and SQL Server app to AWS, and it only takes 5 minutes. It's fun to play, and you might learn something. So what do you say? End the confinement and find freedom on AWS. Now get moving.